Hey folks, it's Soul, and today I'm going to give feedback on how the WoW team released features throughout this first Dragonflight season. It's going to be kind of how they laid out or time gated these features. So, I'm talking about the sparks and the raid stuff, the catalyst, that sort of thing. So I'm going to talk about the good things, the bad things, what can be improved on, and I'm going to come at this from different angles. So if you're not familiar with my style, don't be surprised to hear my opinions waffling back and forth to try and share understanding of what the WoW devs intend versus what players of different skill levels and playstyles want. So if you don't mind, like the video, subscribe for more content, catch me live, yada yada yada, and let's go. So as of this video, Dragonflight has been live for 11 weeks. The first 2 weeks are going to be they're basically the pre-season, where there's no raids or dungeons or rated PvP, but max level players could get access to one spark of ingenuity that lets players make epic crafted gear. To be somewhat specific, we're also in Dragonflight Season 1's 9th week. So we're going to illustrate what I mean with how Dragonflight Season 1 opened up, and I'm going to use a handy dandy chart. For example, with this patch 10.0.5, we finally got the creation catalyst. Crafted gear, it sort of opened up, and soon, on the week of February 14th, cross-realm mythic raiding is going to be a thing, and the Valor and Conquest caps will be lifted. The response from social media, and in my observation, that's a space where most top-end players are the most heard, the reaction has been like, wow, finally, or it's about time, too little, too late, or, something to that effect. So let's take a look at Sparks of Ingenuity, for example. I mentioned the one that we got during the preseason. At the start of Season 1, the second spark became available. And then time passed, we got more, and then the 10.0.5 patch dropped. A total of 5 sparks could be obtained via quest, more can now drop randomly, and the whole quest line of earning those sparks could be shared account-wide, or there was a skip basically. What's funny though is that Primal Chaos, it's another crafting reagent, that couldn't be traded until a week later via hotfix. Now I've given the feedback that between the sparks and the chaos that they should have been unleashed at the same time, and not doing so didn't make much sense, but I'll stop there because it happened, so it's not a big deal. But now let's look at the entire chart. This here is a breakdown of the first 12 weeks of Dragonflight, from late November to the week of February 14th, where you can see Valor and Conquest opening up as well as Crossrealm Mythic. Since even before the launch of Dragonflight, some outspoken players criticized at least what we knew about the season schedule. Valor and Conquest, they were saying that they shouldn't be capped, just like in Season 4 of Shadowlands, and that the Sparks of Ingenuity should just drop, however. Raid Finder should be available at the same time as normal, heroic, and mythic raid difficulties, and the Catalyst should have been there from the very beginning. While some of us may not agree that the schedule should be like this modified schedule below, it's still good feedback. We as individual players, or even Mythic Plus teams and guilds, have different takes on what would be ideal for us, right? For all sorts of different reasons. For the sake of argument, I'm going to say that the crowd who wants a schedule closer to this is mostly considering their time. Like, who cares if Valor is uncapped from the start or if the Catalyst is fully unlocked? Let the players play. Let folks grind if they want, and then it's up to the rest if they want to try to keep up. The WoW devs have a burden that they are the ones who have to care about pacing the way game features open up. It's one thing to see like a Twitter or a forum post that wants uncapped Valor get a whole bunch of likes and engagements, woo-woo. But it's another thing when the WoW team, when they can look at the big data, like what players are actually doing when they're not tabbed out to type out these posts. Unfortunately, this information isn't known to us, so we have to just guess, and that can feel really frustrating when trying to at least understand where the devs are coming from, especially when we don't agree. Instead, we have to observe feedback or complaints from players that we have to kind of look between the lines for. Like, for example, it's a usual complaint from folks who pug to complain that item level or Mythic Plus score requirements are extremely high even during like the first few weeks of a season. Of course that's going to happen. Even between similarly skilled players, there's going to be a difference between the two of them if one player just has more time to play than the other. But what I think the WoW team is trying to avoid is having a player base where there's too far of a separation between players because of a difference in playtime. Some separation is fine. In fact, I'd find it necessary, otherwise it feels like any extra effort doesn't feel valuable. We should also put into context how long players have been waiting for things in Dragonflight as opposed to Shadowlands, in case you forgot. Season 2 of Shadowlands was the first time that Valor and Conquest caps were lifted, and back then it took 4 months until the Valor and Conquest caps were lifted. That was half the season. It was also an extremely long season at 8 months, but later on Season 3 of Shadowlands it felt more brisk, with only a 2-month wait before Valor and Conquest caps were lifted. That's actually going to be the same as how it is now in Dragonflight, a 2-month wait. And then of course Season 4 of Shadowlands, they just let it all go, but that season was only 4 months long. One of those months was the pre-patch, so that was a different set of circumstances altogether. And you might have totally loved it. Just like Shadowlands, Dragonflight has a number of pillars to manage. There's no Soul Ash, but instead we have Sparks and Primal Chaos. The Catalyst is a thing now, not more than halfway through the expansion. There's a deliberate schedule of availability with respect to other game modes that often it isn't really discussed. Like for example, there's a relationship between Sparks of Ingenuity and the Valor cap. Assuming that the player has access to a skilled crafter, 1 Spark of Ingenuity equals 1 item level 418 piece of gear. There's no time gate to make that piece into a mythic piece of gear, it just takes the skill and the effort, or the gold. It's not as high as what one could get from the Great Vault, assuming that something good drops, but instead, in this case, it's fully within the player's control to obtain the way that they want. That made crafted gear easily the best way to gear in the first few weeks of the season. So it doesn't come to anyone's surprise, it shouldn't come to anyone's surprise that Sparks would be gated every 2 or so weeks. When we put crafting alongside the Valor cap though, Valor upgrades feel like trash, especially when it comes to weapon upgrades. So again, it's no wonder that Mythic Plus folk were very unhappy with the Valor cap. 10 or so plus 16s to make a 418 weapon? Alright, cool team, let's get to work. But upgrading that Mythic Plus weapon, yeah, it's gonna take a while. Hey, how about lifting that Valor cap, Blizz? Although, to be fair, these players also had access to crafted gear, and it won't be long until Mythic Plus World can enjoy uncapped Valor and craftable gear. Meanwhile, I think the Revival Catalyst schedule just was not handled very well. I don't think they put too much thought into it. It's jarring for it to not be a thing for weeks and weeks, and then suddenly for it to become a thing. When the WoW team announced the Cross-Realm Mythic schedule, they said the following. With future raids, they said, we're looking into a more scheduled approach for when Cross-Realm Mythic difficulty becomes available. We want to keep our options open for the timing to vary since we don't know the circumstances we might observe in the future, but we intend to provide further announcements like this one to give players time to reorganize. So I think now is a great time to start discussing both this and other endgame systems that ramp up. What I want to do is kind of modify this schedule here to be a bit more brisk, but I'm going to be conservative about it in this example. Suggesting there be no caps and everything unlocked right away, that's what your comments are for. So what could a more ideal Dragonflight Season 1 have looked like? Here's the current schedule. The foundation that can't really be changed is the release of 10.0.5, so that's going to be left alone. What we're going to try to do here is that we're going to hit all of these milestones by the time this patch would launch, which is 6 weeks after Season 1 begins. And then we'll step back and tear it down and talk smack and see what we have. So here's step 1 of this new version. What I did here was shift almost everything up by 3 weeks to line everything up. You'll notice that the Valor and Conquest cap at the start of the season is quite a bit higher as a consequence, which probably feels good, but I don't really like how Valor's looking. A static gain of Valor per week doesn't seem all that right. Now, I don't have a strong opinion on this, but I think that Conquest gains seem okay because there's only certain kinds of gear that can be obtained, and Honor handles the upgrades anyway. So with regards to Valor, how about we increase the rate that the cap goes up each week? Doing so is going to give us a schedule that looks like this. Now here we have a starting cap of 3,750 Valor, and then the next week it goes up by 750, growing at a rate of 250 each week until the cap reaches 10,000 just before it's lifted altogether. When comparing this to the original values, I know that some would say that this is still too low, but I'm also thinking to myself that in the future, players will be making more thoughtful decisions on what they want to upgrade with Valor and what they want to have crafted instead. As mentioned before, I think the Catalyst was the biggest offender this season with a late start, and the only paths in the meantime were to run the raid and hope for something good in the vault. From my observation, it brought in just way too much unnecessary discourse and infighting when really, launching the Catalyst a little bit earlier wouldn't have had a big negative impact, at least I don't think. The WoW team described the Catalyst as something that would be bad luck protection, but I don't think that they thought of the psychological nuance that comes from having the Catalyst be this savior after potentially months-long strings of bad luck. I mean, better late than never isn't exactly what I'd call fun design, so I would suggest something just a little bit different. So have a look at the schedule. The Catalyst launches beginning on the 3rd week of the season. The twist though is that you only get one charge every 2 weeks. Between this and the raids and the vault to rely on, players can feel more assured early on that they'll be able to complete sets or at least start obtaining pieces. After the 3rd charge, the schedule will change to one every week with respects to folks who just want to collect sets for transmog. Now, I'm obviously just speaking for me here, but I kind of like this. It looks fair. We're not getting everything handed to us for almost free. It's faster, but it's not too fast. Currency is a bit more front-loaded to whet people's appetites, but the schedule doesn't favor one game mode over another. The Catalyst doesn't nullify rewards, at least I don't think so, and it's also important to point out that this is a conversation that only covers the first third of the season. There's plenty of time to run alts and focus on more casual content, or to just take a break until the next season. And that's it. That's my feedback. I don't expect us to see eye to eye on much of anything here, but I hope you can at least understand where I'm coming from and what we're trying to do here. So I'd like to hear your suggestions, and if you think this is a good discussion to have, let's have it in the comments or wherever it is that you talk about WoW. So thanks for watching, like the video, subscribe, hang with me over on Twitch, and I'll see you in the next thing. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.